So, I just saw the new Batman movie. I guess we should review it. Alright guys, so this is going to be my initial thoughts and reaction to the Batman movie. I don't want to go into a ton of spoilers, stuff like this, because this was an insanely long movie. It's like 30 hours, essentially. And, well, it was a really badass movie. So, I saw a lot of early reviews that were giving it really high marks. Best Batman ever. Best everything, realistically. And while I expected that to be the hype because Warner Brothers / DC really wanted to kind of fix a flop of a thing, I think that every bit of the hype was very much warranted. Going into this movie, I don't want to say tainted by any means. I didn't watch any real reviews of it. I watched basic, quick reviews. Didn't want any spoilers. Didn't want to know the big things going on. And that's one reason why I don't want to spoil this for anybody who's going to go see it. This was, in essence, the best modern take on a Batman movie we've had in a very long time. It didn't have a giant ensemble hero cast where Batman had to rely on other people to get things done. He was just relying on his normal cast of people. Jim Gordon, the cops in general, Alfred, his own brain, which this Batman had one. And basically, it was just him versus the Riddler for the good portion of this movie. And as a younger Batman, he's only been prowling the streets of Gotham for 2 years, so this is basically like Batman year 2, And crime is on the rise. Things are not improving since he's been doing the thing. And basically, he's just at that point where he goes out every night and he does his thing. But he's also known. The opening of this movie is actually really freaking cool. Not the initial opening with the Riddler doing Riddlery things, but the first appearance of Batman. We got a good voiceover from our good friend Mr. Pattinson, and it's so funny. So one thing I'll say specifically about this version of Batman, he doesn't have a stupid Batman voice. He just talks. I know, crazy, right? He just talks. However, he has his own internal monologue Batman voice. So as he's talking to himself, he's putting on a Batman voice. It's kind of funny. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of the Batman Beyond episode where he talks. I forget exactly what happened, but it was one of those things where they were trying to figure out who Batman was. Bruce, I believe Bruce was wearing a mask and a thing like that, so he was trying to read his mind. I forget exactly what the deal was, but basically they were talking about how Bruce doesn't, his inner monologue, he doesn't call himself Bruce, he calls himself Batman. In this one, it has that vibe where when he's alone talking to himself, he's very much Batman. He does not have a Bruce Wayne thing. We do get some Bruce Wayne action in this movie where he takes off everything and has to put on a suit and go do the thing. And by the way, Batman drives a split window Corvette Stingray. That's pretty badass, I'm not gonna lie. Not Batman, I should say Bruce Wayne does. So instead of having the Rolls or the Mercedes or anything super high-end or crazy car, even this being a modern, an extremely modern take, everybody has smartphones, the internet is definitely a thing, like Reddit forums are basically a thing, not by name, but concept. And everything about this movie, from the script to the acting to the visual direction, everything about it is very top-notch. And I think we're so used to seeing a comic book movie that has to be a certain way. Maybe that's the Marvel way of doing things or the DCEU way of doing things. Between this movie and Joker, we've gotten a very realistic take on these villains slash heroes, as it were, depending on the moment and how they see themselves. And much like the Joker, it's shot in a very real world style Gotham. You know, it does look and function like New York. The cops look like NYPD. It is an island. It's got a few bridges. There's no Statue of Liberty, technically speaking, but it looks like New York. I know technically it's not really supposed to be New York, but it's more that version of Gotham that's New York, whereas I think in Joker is very Chicago / New York. You know, we don't have to get the origin again. We do cover the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne as a part of the plot, but it isn't an origin story. This is a Batman who's been around for a minute. We don't see him going off to learn martial arts. We don't see him picking up his tech. We just jump into a Batman who has a lot of his base tech. He has his armor. He has his suit. He's got the bat signal. He's got a bat bike, which mostly just looks like a bike. But the one at the end of the film, I think technically is the bat cycle at that point, because it's got like some ears coming off of it. The Batmobile is pretty badass. It's only really used for the one big car chase scene, but in that was pretty fucking cool. You also get to see him assembling it, so it's the car body is covered up in the new Batcave, which he probably is sharing with the Ninja Turtles at some point, because it's definitely an abandoned rail station. It's actually really funny. So you see the engine torn apart on a stand. Later on, you see the crank, the cams, the intake manifold, all this stuff laid out in perfect order, like it's been disassembled and ready to go back together. And it does seem like it has two engines. It does seem like it has a front engine, like probably like a supercharged V8, and in the rear, almost like a V12 that pushes the thrusters, something like that. It's really crazy because it looks like a normal motor, but ends in an afterburner. We see these things in the trailer, so that's not even spoilers. And it is roughly Dodge Charger-like, but it could also be a Camaro. It's really kind of hard to tell. And it's just overall very much like a Mad Max car, which is also pretty fucking cool. And that entire chase scene where he is chasing the Penguin down, the way it's shot, both in car view, either from the driver's point of view, like, or the camera like will pan out and around, like from the driver's point of view, or it's a like GoPro on the side of the car, or something like that, for depending on type of shot. Really awesomely shot. And then the idea, you see this in the trailer as well, where things explode and he thinks he's got him and he's laughing his ass off, and then you see the Batmobile jump over the flames and then land, smash into him, roll his car over. All of that fucking cool. Now, character wise, we've got Batman / Bruce Wayne. We've got Jim Gordon. We've got Selina Kyle. We've got Penguin. And essentially the Riddler. Obviously, main Batman. Or main villain. And we've got other gangsters such as Falcone and thereabouts. And the connections between all of these people is the point of this movie. The connections behind everything, behind Gotham City, behind the police, behind the mayor, behind the Bat, behind the Penguin, behind everyone, is what this movie is about. That's realistically what it is. And it's all about finding the truth. And you see that from the Riddler. So we do get the backstory of the Riddler, mostly. We do get, obviously, Bruce Wayne, he comes about. The Penguin is just kind of an established character in it. Also, Colin Farrell, okay. Insane transformation to be that character. Selina Kyle, you get her backstory and you get her complete motivation for what she's going through in this movie. Gordon, other than just being the only good cop that Batman can trust, and he's clearly built a relationship with over the last couple of years, their relationship is the backbone of this movie, because without Gordon, Batman doesn't get anywhere. To the point that the opening murder in this movie, which we see in the trailers, you get Gordon walking the Batman into this incredibly important crime scene through several dozen cops who have this, and they have the camera locked on like his helmet basically. So it's almost like a lot of this stuff has some GoPro type action where you're seeing it from the point of view of the character that is interacting. But for him to be walked into this crime scene by Gordon, and the cops just staring at him, like they probably have never really seen the Batman. They probably heard of him. They've cleaned up his leftovers, dealt with the criminals he's left behind and whatnot. Everybody knows of the Batman. Everybody knows what he means. And of course, he's not exactly with the cops, and he's not exactly against the cops, and nor are they exactly with him or against him, just depending on the situation. But it's pretty cool. And the thing about it, the reason he brings him into this crime scene, not only is it a super important one due to the person who was murdered, it's because Gordon knows that Batman is a detective. So he literally detects. He picks up on clues. He's very smart. He works his way through things. He has tech that helps him do things. He also has Alfred on the side as a resource as well, especially for decoding the Riddler's codes he leaves behind. And that's something we've been sorely lacking. Ben Affleck's Batman, if you see the Ultimate Edition of BVS, I guess you get some of his detective skills in that. The Justice League movie, you get some of that as well, as he hunts down the individual aspects of the Justice League that he needs to grab and pick up. But you don't see him do the work. You just know that he did based on the small amount of information he was given from Lex Luthor and or Argus. So we never got to see that. Michael Keaton's Batman had a little bit of that. Val Kilmer's Batman, because he was also the only other one against the Riddler, as it were, was actually very detective-like. That movie was not great because Joel Schumacher, but it was still a fun romp, and we got a Batman who used his brain more than his fists. You know, and obviously there's the old joke that Batman uses his money to beat up the sadly mentally unstable people of Gotham. The poor and mentally unstable of Gotham, Batman uses his money to beat them. Sorry, it's a bad joke, actually, in this movie. So, as the mysteries unfold, as the Riddler is killing very high-profile people and leaving behind more clues for the Batman, the way that things are established, the way the story is unfolding, the way that the Riddler and Batman are interacting, the way he has set up all of the stuff that he does in this movie is pretty terrifying. If you watch The Joker, his character basically is just going through some of the worst possible days of his life, and he's highly mentally unstable. He snaps and happens upon all these things. He doesn't have a plan. He doesn't go into anything with any particular concept of what he wants to do. He just makes a name for himself and becomes big enough to end up in a place that he enacts change by his action. The Riddler, on the other hand, has worked behind the scenes. Nobody knows who the hell he is. He's masterfully intelligent, sets up his entire plan in action, and basically is just moving Batman wherever he wants him to. And it's pretty freaking impressive, the way that this was written out. So, enough about Riddler. Catwoman, who's not called Catwoman in this. The only time that it's really referenced is she calls herself the Cat. near the end. So she brings up the concept of the bat and the cat, or the cat and the bat. Either way, she likes cats. She has cats. All that kind of stuff. And the only thing we don't technically get from her is any kind of backstory regarding her skill set. We only get her actual origin story as it goes in the movie. And Zoe Kravitz did fine. I know in our podcast that I released this morning, we talked about it, and in the kind of aspect of race swapping a character who is predominantly white with a black actress. And mind you, Zoe Kravitz is very, very light-skinned, but not that that should matter. But she does play the hell out of this role. Now, does that mean that nobody else could have? I don't know. I don't know who else it would have possibly been looking at for the role. But we've gotten very good versions of Catwoman, even over almost every version, except for, what was that one? Anyways, so as Selena Kyle goes, and Selena Kyle's motivations, as the beginning version of this Catwoman makes a lot of sense. And then given the events of this movie, assuming that this universe continues, her motivation also very much continues on in the same manner as the comic book character would. The only thing that's kind of dumb is her wardrobe. And I only say that because we see her in her cat suit, for lack of a better term. I pretty much think that is technically called a cat suit. And we see her in fairly skimpy attire, but basically the same outfit, more or less. So she goes through, I guess, almost nobody really goes through a wardrobe change throughout this movie, now that I think about it. I think technically Bruce has the most actual wardrobe changes because we see him actually change clothes, not just Batsuit, which, by the way, he just hauls around in a backpack. So he does a whole lot of sleuthing and a whole bunch of stuff in that weird jacketed outfit with the cap and all that you see in the really, really bad action figures. But it works. And so he'll manage to sneak into a place or get somewhere essentially unnoticed. And then he'll somehow very quickly change into his bat gear, do what he got to do as Batman, and then quickly get out of his disguise, or technically get into a disguise, because we all know Batman is who he is, not the other. Either way, you know what I mean. And then he just hops on his bike and leaves. So that's the one thing that's great about this. We actually get to see him doing not just punching a bunch of folks as Batman, which he does do. The actual action in this movie is fairly limited. He does get shot at more than he directly engages in fights, which, having completely bulletproof armor, is pretty awesome. Though I will say the one dumb thing about it, he's got a huge amount of his face open. Like, everything from here all the way back here is completely open. Never gets a scratch on him. He has a little bit of a bruise, like right around here after one of his initial fights, because he takes everything off and eventually does that. But like, nothing along this part of his face, even with an explosion going off directly in his face, doesn't do anything. Now he gets his arms up, but no, I'm sorry. If you see how shredded his suit is after that explosion, the fact that he has no damage at all to his actual face is ridiculous. That's the only thing that I find actually absurd about this movie. Because even when he gets into fights, he gets punched in the face a lot. No bruising, except for on that one kind of thing. And if Pattinson was doing a lot of the actual action in the suit, cool. I know he did not want to get ripped for this. He was in shape, but he wasn't the, super swole, 1% body fat Batman that we know of. He's what I would call year 2 Batman. He's been through some shit, but he's not fighting superhumans. He's fighting just normal criminals. I mean, like, he's got nothing crazy going on. He needs to be fit because he's got to move around pretty quickly. He needs to be able to fight. And he needs to be able to at least hold on to his grapple hook, which he uses a lot in this movie, and it's awesome. He has like armor plates and stuff like this on his arm, but he also has the whatever they call spikes and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. He has a batarang on his chest that is very well hidden. The actual bat symbol is a batarang, which is hilarious because that's something you almost never see. I think somewhere, maybe, but I know on the belt made more sense, like the belt emblem, but his utility belt, while he has it, isn't a prominent feature. But the fact that the only use he gets out of his batarang, as it was, he doesn't throw it. He just uses it as a knife. It's got a very, very sharp edge. It's pretty cool. But the funny thing is, we do get a scene where he uses it to cut something, and then he thunk, magnetically sticks it back to his chest. It's like, okay then. There was one part of the movie where you actually do think he dies. But they don't let it sit for very long. So, you know, it was like, there was a part of this movie I thought that they legitimately were going to kill him off, and another kid would basically take over as Batman in a way. Almost Dark Knight Rises style, but not like that. But it's like, I figured it might end up being like a layered Batman story, but no. But he legit looks like he flat out dies. But he does something that we've never really seen a Batman do. He injects himself with some adrenaline or something, some stim pack, which is pretty cool. So he pulls it off his belt. I mean, it's not mine. It's just it's a Batman thing to do, right? So he pulls it off his belt. He's literally barely functioning, barely conscious. He has, I don't know if it was on his leg or on his arm, I couldn't tell, but it's a little port that he opened up on his armor, plugs the thing into it, and ejects, and he just, and then he just rages, which is actually pretty cool. It goes berserker for about a minute. But, there was a lot of craziness. And the entire point of this version of Batman, sorry, I need a drink. He's still on his vengeance quest. Now, we always think about the idea that Batman is always going to be out for vengeance for his parents' death. But he's not about justice so much as vengeance. And he even says that in that opening line, you know, when the guy asks him, who are you supposed to be? And he's like, I'm vengeance. Now, that is probably the most Batman-y voice he does in the entire movie. When he beats the fuck out of that dude who's, like, not a Joker. Which, we never got a backstory to those guys, except that they're a very specific gang. And now I want to talk about a couple other things that were direct social commentary in this movie. So, that opening fight, where he beats up the clown-looking dudes, or the Los Muertos, or Los Muertes, Las Muertes? Either way, Dia de los Muertos, fuck it, me, Spanish, whatever, sorry. The skull-faced people, not Bobby. So he beats up the one and then have to fight off a bunch of them until they give up. There's a lead-in to this, where you see him witness several different crimes going on, and he's monologuing over everything. And you're not sure which crime he's going to stop, which is part of the story that he's telling. That he's made such a name for himself that when that light goes on in the sky, it's not just a symbol to summon him. It's also a warning to criminals. So everybody who's mid-crime and they look up and the bat signal's on, they all look to the darkest shadows near them, and then they go the other direction. Except for these skull-faced people. Now, their whole thing, they started on kind of a subway train or public transit train, whatever you want to call it. And they're clearly a gang that goes around, and your initiation is basically the knockout game. If you know what the knockout game is, well, you know how sad our society's become, because it's a completely real thing. And while almost everyone is wearing full makeup, one young black kid, who's clearly being initiated, only has half his face done, showing that he's not fully in the gang. And so they're trying to figure out a new target for this guy to go after, and they target the only Asian guy on the train. Now, the important part about this, what happens here, is his reluctance. He clearly has been more pressured into this, or situationally, he's just tagging along, but now he literally has to assault an innocent person to up his game. And they do directly make it a young black man assaulting an Asian guy. Now, when this movie was being created, I don't think was necessarily in the crazy height of that situation in 2020 that rolled into 2021. I know this movie was delayed massively for COVID, but it was definitely a social commentary. But it was on the fact that the group was bringing it on, even even to the point that they were holding the guy and said, "Okay, knock his ass out," and he kind of was like not really wanting to, and then Batman intervenes. Now the funny thing is, this Batman, while he can be super sneaky, half the time he's doing like the gunslinger thing where you hear him walking up. So he's got very heavy boots. They're like combat boots. And the armor and everything he's got on is pretty heavy, so you actually hear his footsteps when he wants you to. And he's clearly being loud enough for them to hear, what the hell is that? And then he literally walks out of the shadows. So he doesn't drop in to start beating the shit out of everybody. Now he can, and he does get the drop on people every now and then, especially near the climax of the movie. He literally does a very, very Batman-like thing from above. It's actually pretty cool. But in this case, he literally is just walking up. And these guys don't seem to know who Batman is, but that kid did. He saw the bat signal, and he was already afraid. And the thing he didn't do was beat up a guy in front of Batman. In fact, he turned and ran away when he could. And that was good. Now, the other social commentary that was dropped by Selena, and it was a very subtle line, but not at the same time. And to have a person of color use this term was like, like, okay, we know what you're doing here. And she referred to, this is when she and Batman are having an argument about how to deal with the current situation that's going on. And she talks about the white privileged billionaires downtown that have fucked this city over. And I don't think that they necessarily had to use that verbiage. I think they probably could have got away with just talking about how they're, like, instead of white privilege, they could have said white collar criminals, something along those lines. Well, I guess because some irony that most of the people at the top aren't, well, probably like Italian and other, and you could say white, but whatever. But to have a black woman use that, and also she's saying it to Batman, which was the irony of the scene, the purposeful irony of the scene. But I feel like that's one of the few things they slipped in there. Now, some people accuse this of having a lot of wokeism, whatever. No, this movie is not woke in any way, shape, or form. The only thing it does is talk about how money and power can corrupt, and if the wrong people have both, it can go very, very wrong for everyone. Now, that's not a woke concept. That is just reality. You know, that's just what it is. And they base it off of a lot of, I don't know if it's more modern history of how Thomas Wayne and the elites of Gotham and how the criminal underground and all that stuff is tied together in the history of Gotham and everything like that. I think some of that is from more modern comics. At least a couple of the ones that I've read, like Sins of the Father, and Batman White Knight, and even probably somewhere in the Court of Owls kind of storyline, which was really interesting because they almost had a Court of Owls situation, to my mind, with the way Riddler was doing things, in a way. And he also had that vibe with just only the way he dressed and stuff like that, but without the physical prowess of the Court of Owls. But it's like a whole, you know, secret running stuff behind the scenes kind of thing, even though he's just a criminal. He wasn't one of those people. In fact, he was standing up against either way. Watch the movie. So I'm trying not to give a lot away by any means. Obviously, we've got a murder mystery. We have the unknown history of Gotham and how it came to be, or at least in the modern era, how it came to be, and then the story of power and money and corruption and all that kind of stuff that goes down. And Batman, as usual, learning his place in that world. And it's a really good story. And you get it from the point of view of the different people suffering their way through it. And it's also very similar to what happened in Joker. The rich got richer, the poor got poorer, the city was suffering, and unfortunately, somebody was trying to change things. Other people really wanted it to stay the same. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that in the real world, and I don't want to go into it politically, but real life is imitating art a little too closely nowadays, and it's getting scary. It's like they read fiction and said, we can actually do that, and it shouldn't be like, no, you shouldn't do that. But either way, I think that the negative reviews, at least that I've kind of heard from people, are all full of bullshit. I really do. Now, you can just not like a movie, and that's fine. But I think some of the negative criticisms I've heard aren't really warranted versus somebody who just want to take this movie down for some reason. I have no idea why. However, all of the positive reactions and reviews that I've encountered have all been on point. Like, without spoiler details, without anything like that, just given the exposure to and criticizing just the movie as it was, I completely agree with almost every sentiment that I've heard so far from everyone. There was one, I think it was the Birdman, said he really didn't dig John Turturro as Carmine Falcone. And I think while you would normally see John Turturro in a comedic role, he definitely wasn't here. He was very serious. And he didn't have a ton of screen time, and he was mostly like an exposition dump, but he was also very important in the movie. Unlike the old Falcone from, like, say, the Nolanverse. So that's a whole thing. And I think for Batman, a clearly young Batman, to come up against a criminal like the Riddler so early on, like this. Also, there's a particular cameo reference, just reference, that I went, I see what you did there. There is a cameo near the end of the movie, which you knew was going to come, and I'm like, and just given what we can see of said person, I'm like, I don't know. But also, this Batman movie does not take place in any version that we've seen before. This is not a sequel to Joker. It would have been interesting if it was, but it is not. In a lot of ways, it carries on the same themes. It literally could have happened to where what happened in Joker could have been the inciting incident, but they make it very clear this is not that. They also throw out a couple extra name drops here and there for certain places and things like that, which is pretty cool. Not gonna lie, it's pretty cool. But no other superhero references, not like, well, Superman wouldn't have this problem, or Metropolis doesn't have these issues. Nothing like that. This was kept very, very Gotham, and it was cool about that. And Batman, while it doesn't have massive international connections, but he does have his Bat Tech. He's got his very small Bat family that's going on. Part of me was thinking the only child in this movie that made any difference. I was like, that's gonna be Robin in the future if this continues, which would still work. I don't know. He couldn't be any Robin we know because the name doesn't go with anything. But then again, one Robin we got in the Nolanverse also had nothing to do with anything. So whatever. Overall, if I had to throw out a number grade for this, I would say it's an easy, 9 out of 10. It is really, really well done. Even to the point, I didn't even talk about it. The sound design and the music, they keep wanting to push into a Batman theme during an action scene, but they don't. And then later at the end of the movie, near the end of the movie, they actually do. Like, so a proper Batman theme never really happens, but you get hints of it here. Some stuff kind of boom, boom, boom. And then boom. It's trying to build to an actual theme for the movie. And then it does happen later. And then, of course, having, a particular Nirvana song just used through the movie, 2, maybe 3 times. It was really cool. And just the sound design was really cool because everything is wet. It is constantly raining in this movie. So you get footsteps, you get constant rain. Every little thing, such as like the Batmobile powering up for the first time, is really cool and it stands out. There's so much going on with this movie. It's nuts. And I know there's got to be CG in this movie somewhere, but it doesn't stand out anywhere. Because, I mean, it would have to be in fight scenes or something. And there's also a lot in this that could probably be compared to Netflix Daredevil. Especially some of the fights that go down. Like the one that you see in the trailer where it's like a dark hallway and it's only lit by the guns, by the muzzle flares. Muzzle flashes, whatever you want to call it. Holy shit, though. That was cool. You know. And also, just the way his mask works makes him look a little Daredevil-ish. Now, the bat suit design, it's mostly fine. It works. It's armor. The cape seems kind of superfluous, but it always sort of was. It does have one cool utility function that we do get to see it use, and you're like, how did that... Explain. I wanted to know how more... Show me that again. How did that happen? And I will say, the critiques of his cowl are warranted. I'm not gonna lie. The ears are like really far back. They're like back here and like kind of slightly curved. It would make sense if they were just a little bit further forward, like maybe an inch, if that. And also, it looks like there's no room for his ears. Like, his ears, like, proper are really squeezed in there. And considering he's got to have some type of communication device tucked in there a little bit, because we see him use a lot of in-ear devices and stuff like that throughout the thing. He has some interesting shield tech, and I mean that as in from the Marvel Universe. It's pretty funny. Very, very, very similar technology the shield has. No explanation, he just has it. We don't have to say, I got this from here. This came out of this. Nope, I just have these fucking toys, and that's how we're going to play this. And I kind of appreciate that. After having everything explained and the history of every little bit of tech shown off in the Nolan-verse, and even a little bit in the Snyder-verse, getting the Reeves-verse, I guess. No explanation. We just have it. It's like I said, the Batmobile, we see it technically getting built off-screen, mind you. But we see the parts. We see the pieces. And then it eventually shows up. Now, the sense of time on this is a little bit wonky. Like, how much time has actually passed. Because it could feel like just a couple of days. Or it could be a month. It's kind of hard to tell because it starts on Halloween. And then he talks about... What day did it end? November? Or March? I'm trying to remember because he does like a voice diary, and I think it was in like months later, or past the end of the movie itself. So something changes thereabouts, but within the movie you don't really get a sense of overall time from one thing to the next thing. You could say that it pretty much just takes place only in November. We never get to like Thanksgiving, as far as we could tell, but we definitely have Halloween at the actual beginning of the movie is on Halloween. And then it is election season, so in theory that's also in November. So the whole thing probably takes place in early November over the course of a week or so, maybe a little bit longer. But at some point he had to have time to put his car together, probably on his own. So that would have taken a minute or two. If you guys have ever built an engine, it doesn't just go together that fast. And it looks like a lot of his stuff isn't automated. It looks like a lot of it is by hand. He's, you know, we see him playing with stuff. We see the Bat computer. We see other things like that. It's a very stripped down and easy Bat cave to work in. So this is still. Oh, they're even worried about his money. They're even worried about Wayne Tech and all that. Not Wayne. Well, yeah, I guess Wayne Enterprises. All that kind of stuff does matter. It comes up. The future, the name of Wayne, does come up, and you get the evolution of Batman from being vengeance only beat 'em up Batman to a new version of Batman by the end. You do. And that's actually a very cool characterization that makes sense for this early stage of Batman, and I really do like it. So, overall, big recommend for it. Ignore the bullshit you've heard. It is that good. And it's definitely the best modern interpretation of a realistic Batman. If you go from Justice League's Batman, that is definitely a man who's been functioning amongst gods. This is a man who has only fought other men who don't have his toys. So, this is not the Batman who is respected by gods. This is a Batman who is feared by men. So, it's pretty cool in that manner. He's not stupid. He beats people up with his money, but he also has a brain about him. He can figure stuff out just by ruminating it. He's noticing little details that the cops are missing in the crime scenes. He's setting things up. He's like, here, do this, do that. And the thing is, the funny part is, like, some of the things seem Deus Ex Machina-esque, but every single thing is given a perfectly good reason to happen. Even if it happens off screen, it was set up that that's what was going to happen before it happened off screen, and your brain just goes, I see what they did. I know how this happened. So it's a very well structured movie. Looks pretty, shot pretty, soundtrack is great, acting is all on point for everybody. Jeffrey Wright actually as Gordon. Even if he wasn't Gordon, what he did was great. So even if they didn't race swap Gordon, and he could have been any other given detective in the police force, still would have been fine. Colin Farrell as the Penguin, I don't even know what to do with that, because you wouldn't even know if you were not told who he was. You would not recognize him, not in his acting, not in his face, nothing. It's just an entirely absorbed character, and it's crazy. So that's going to be it, guys. So I'll catch you next time. I don't think I'll really do a spoiler review. We're going to probably talk about it on the next podcast. If you guys are interested, it's the Now You Made It Awkward podcast. It's here on the Shoky channel. If you want to follow it, we're talking about nerd stuff, you know, as it goes. And just life in general. So I'll see you guys next time. And as always, keep on nerding. And I am the Knight. He didn't say he's the Knight. He just said he's a vengeance. So if you can go from being vengeance to being Knight, it's even better. Bye, guys.